22. Sunday's events began at 9 with the hurdles. Bullitt got there early to secure for himself one of the best seats on the course. Overnight the wind had changed direction, and now it blew down the length of the valley from the north. Big, gray-bottomed clouds rode it, like barges. Their bottoms showed flat overhead, but as they floated away you could see white towers rising up from their surfaces. Bullitt sat in the cold air, watching the sky and the mountains, watching the people arrive and arrange themselves on the stands, watching the competitors come onto the track. Tammer had a word with the coach, then did some limbering exercises. Once he was loosened up, he jogged around the course, taking the far outside track so as not to interfere with the hurdles or with the men working and talking at the center. The oval track, its inner and outer edges lined with white fences, looked more than anything else like a plowed field. The dark cinder paths, along with runners would go, were edged with white tape and were the color of newly turned earth. The runners would follow along around those paths like plowmen. Bullitt thought, making the lines other runners would follow. In a way, everybody was plowing on a track. In a way, everybody was on a track. Things put you on a track. Your time, your nature, things that happened personally to you, things people did, things you yourself did, and you ran it. You kept to your own path. The markings did that for you, kept you on the path, and the fences inside and outside kept you on the track. I don't run on the track, Bullitt said to himself, or really in races. The high and windy thought frightened him a little, as if he had been blown up among the clouds where he didn't belong. But he didn't belong on any track either. He didn't mind not belonging, that wasn't it. And he wasn't frightened, scared. He wasn't even really frightened. It was as if he had just swallowed air too clear, too gold with sunlight, for his lungs. It felt good in his lungs, good beyond any imagining, so good it was frightening. It wasn't his own differences that got to him. He'd always known his own differences. And it wasn't as if he'd really swallowed that cloud-high air. He'd just gotten a taste of it. Wow, he thought. The runners went up to their marks. They crouched down into a starting position. Tammer had the third inside lane and Mr. Baltimore the fourth. Tammer's head was down, but the other guy was looking over across at him, measuring him. The gun went, and they took off. It was clear from the first that the race was between these two. They were both fast, and both took the hurdles smoothly. Tammer had the edge in weight and muscle power. Mr. Baltimore had his length of leg and lighter weight. For the first quarter they stayed together, almost in perfect step. You're going to have to run yourself, not him. Bullitt wondered if the black could figure that out. He wondered if the black could run his own pace, taking it from nobody else, taking it from himself and forcing it on himself. Physically he could, Bullitt knew that. But whether he had the brain and the heart for it, Bullitt couldn't be sure. So that, when Tammer's arms came almost imperceptibly up and his stride between the hurdles took him steadily foot by foot ahead, Bullitt sat nodding to himself and smiling in satisfaction. Mr. Baltimore, trying to keep up to Tammer's pace, threw himself slightly out of rhythm and lost a little more distance. Tammer seemed unaware of him as he paced himself up another notch, because he could do it. Good for you, Tammer. Bullitt didn't say anything to Tammer about the race. He figured he didn't need to. Tammer knew what he'd done, and for himself. Bullitt didn't go over to join the team members either while the first two exhibition events were held. He drifted with the crowd to the ringside to wait through a middle distance run, then stuck around for the high jump exhibition. The sun came out warm whenever it wasn't blocked by clouds. He could feel how sharp the difference in the air was on the top of his head, cool shadow and warm light. A dozen girls stood waiting to jump. He was just waiting through the time until the events and ceremonies were over, until they took the long ride back south, until school tomorrow. Next weekend, he'd put in 2 full days of oystering, and that he looked forward to. She caught his eye first by the stillness of her waiting. She held his eye by her slender height and the proud way she moved into position. The symmetry of her face, the strength of her stride, the calm and concentrated expression of her eyes as brown as velvet. He didn't know if she was beautiful. He only knew her beauty hit him like an explosion. He watched the rhythm and strength of her approach, the high lifting control of her jump, and the dancer's grace of her landing. Her shoulders rose. the only acknowledgement of applause. She got into line to wait for her second jump, fell still. Her silky skin shone the color of the black earth where the bay ate away at marsh grasses. Beautiful. The last event of the championships preceding the presentation luncheon was the relay race, held in 3 heats, 2 elimination, and then the final. The coach waved Bullitt over to join the team. "How'd you like to be number 10?" he asked. "Fine," Bullitt said. "I mean, from nowhere to number 10 in the state. How does that sound to you, Tillerman?" Bullitt didn't bother repeating himself. "So I want you to run in the relay. You and Shipp, Johnson, and Landry." He indicated the 2 blacks who regularly ran the relay. "I don't run on the track." "If we can just get a 6th in this, and we can't with our regulars, then we'll have the 10 slot. I've been figuring out the points. Get 10 for sure, and depending on how the rest do in the relays, maybe 9. So will you?" "No." The coach was angry, but all he said was, "Shipp, you talk to him." Tamer's eyebrows flew up. Bullitt could have laughed. "Come on, guys," the coach said to the other members of the team. "Let's leave them alone to see if anyone can persuade the great man to do something for the rest of us." He shot one last angry and frustrated look at Bullitt before leaving. "No," Bullitt said to Tamer. Tamer unwrapped a piece of gum slowly, put it into his mouth, and chewed. Bullitt waited. "So, you don't want to be our token white?" Tamer finally asked. Bullitt grinned. "You got it." Tamer chewed and thought some more. "The way I figure it, the rest of us can hold them for sure. If you're running anchor, then we might do something." "Sounds about right," Bullitt said. "But you don't run on the track," Tamer added. "And I can't see the other teams being willing to join you out among the fields and flowers." "Neither can I," Bullitt agreed. Tamer thought and chewed. Bullitt waited. The black guy was too smart not to see it, and when he'd given up trying all possibilities, he'd accept Bullitt's decision. "I have an idea," Tamer said. "Tell me what you think of it." "I have an idea that the whole slavery thing was just as bad for whites as it was for blacks. What do you think?" "What?" Bullitt shrugged, troubled. "I don't think anything. People are just what they are, and that's not much as a rule." "That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean 'tall," Tamer pointed out. "I know what you meant," Bullitt snapped. Tamer waited. "Nobody can make me," Bullitt said, getting angry. "Brother, even when you're on the track, you aren't running on the track. Don't you know that yet?" This time it was Bullitt taking time to think. "Okay," Bullitt said finally. "Good," Tamer said, turning away. "On a deal," Bullitt halted him. "You don't make deals," Tamer said, turning. "Just this once." Bullitt was glad he'd nettled the black guy. "If you'll give me your word to stay out of Vietnam. Don't tell me—" He cut off Tamer's protests. "Because you can. You know it. Have another kid. Stay in school. Be a teacher. Get religion. Whatever it takes. That one's not your war." "What, you got a patent on it?" "You know what I mean. How can I give my word about something that has nothing to do with me?" "Give it. You'll keep it." Bullitt waited. "Okay," Tamer said, "but I don't know why you feel like you have to get even with me. What difference does it make to you if I figure out what makes you tick?" "You haven't," Bullitt denied it. "Yeah? I told you, brother. I'm a civilized man. I know something about other people. That's what civilization is about." Bullitt walked away to get his direction for the relay. "You remember how to take the baton?" the coach asked him, still angry, too angry to praise Bullitt's good sportsmanship, for which Bullitt was grateful. "I hope so," Bullitt said. On the track, waiting in position, he didn't know what to think of himself being there. He wasn't at all concerned about how he'd do. How he did had nothing to do with him, however he did. He'd run, that was all. And if they came in among the top 3 of these teams, he'd have to do the same thing again. When the baton came into his hand, he sprinted, sudden and fast. It wasn't until he got over the finish line that he learned he'd overtaken 2 runners to bring them in third. After the second eliminating heat had been held in an exhibition of girls' pole vaulters, they ran the finals. "I can't believe you're doing this," Bullitt said to himself, looking around again at the track. But as if his body wanted nothing to do with his opinion, he felt the baton come into his hand again. He took off running. The whole team was gathered at the end of that race. Among the incoherent noises, Bullitt ascertained that they had again come in third. Hands grabbed Bullitt and hoisted him up onto shoulders. "Hey, put me down," he yelled. Nobody paid any attention to him. They held him on their shoulders, their hands firm on his legs so he couldn't clamber free. Tammer stood back, watching this amused. "Let me go," Bullet demanded. They carried him on around to the starting line. "Put me down, you hear me?" He struggled to get free, but hands reached up to hold him steady. He looked down at all the faces. "All right, have it your way," he thought, relaxing. After all, he figured they must be feeling pretty good right now, pretty good about him, pretty good about themselves. He wasn't sure how he was feeling, but he was pretty sure about them, and he didn't mind. They were back at the starting line before he had finally struggled free and gotten his feet back on the ground.